Alrighty, people, we are live. It is Sunday morning. Doing these morning streams more and more now, although I guess I haven't done many, but the reason why I've felt moved to do them in the morning is because, I don't know, I guess I'm a tad more alert in the morning nowadays. I can kind of keep it together for those late night streams that I was doing on the road in New Hampshire for all those weeks, but feel a bit more lucid when I can wake up, get settled, have some coffee, and gather my thoughts and then present them before you. So, yesterday, as I'm sure all of you are aware, Bernie won a romping victory, thumping victory, insert your adjective victory, in Nevada. The latest totals, and of course, they're not all in yet because in the American electoral system, counting votes is extremely complicated. So, you have to wait days and days to get the final result, it seems. But the final result, at least for now, appears to be Bernie 46 and his closest rival, Joe Biden, at 19.6. So you do the math there. That, by any reasonable measure, is a landslide victory. Margin currently is 26.5%, which means that Bernie may win virtually all the delegates. I believe the estimated delegate count now is Bernie 13, Biden 2, Mayor Pete 1, with the rest getting 0. So, what to make of all this? Well, Bernie is extremely well positioned to do very well across the western United States. The most significant portent for Tuesday, because if he wins California by even a comparable margin, that is going to give him an effectively insurmountable delegate lead. And because the Democratic primary system is all proportional, in order to make up a deficit when you're behind, you have to win a truly blowout victory in many states. And California being the biggest state, if you can bring up the margins there, then that almost makes it impossible to ever come back if you're another candidate. So Bernie's evident strength among Latino voters in particular obviously is highly relevant to California, could even be relevant in Arizona and New Mexico and elsewhere in the country. But Latino voters in the West in particular seem to be quite good for Bernie. Obviously, you have regional differences. It's not a monolithic vote by any stretch. But that's a very positive sign for him. He also seems to be doing better with moderate, quote unquote, voters, although I don't even like these designations ideologically that they ask for at entrance polls. Like, for example, I don't even know how I would answer the entrance poll question of what is your ideology, because it's usually divided into very liberal, somewhat liberal, moderate, conservative. I don't think any of those encapsulates how I conceive of my political orientation. So I would probably pick moderate, but just because I find so many liberals to be annoying, not because it's actually a accurate distillation of my political beliefs. So I almost think a lot of people pick from those categories almost randomly. But nonetheless, him doing surprisingly well, maybe not surprisingly, but conspicuously well among self-described moderate voters is positive for a number of reasons. First, it means that he's carrying forth more of his coalition from 2016 than you might have supposed based on the results in Iowa and New Hampshire. The so-called moderate candidates than Bernie did. And Bernie doesn't want to be pigeonholed as just this liberal insurgent candidate, which was never what he was. In 2016, a key element of his coalition was that he had strong support from rural, kind of culturally the most prominent demographic. That's why Bernie in 2016 won states like West Virginia, Oklahoma, Utah, etc. So let me just give you the ideological breakdown here. According to CNN, Bernie won very liberal voters with 49%, somewhat liberal voters with 29%, and got moderate voters with 22%, while Biden actually did win that category with 25%. And then in terms of the conservative voters, it was not a large enough portion for CNN to break out. Now, I should say for Biden, obviously he lost in a landslide technically, but for him to get now what looks like around 19% in Nevada is not that bad, all things considered, given how bad of a campaign he's run, given how embarrassing his finishes were in Iowa and New Hampshire, and given that it indicates, at least preliminarily, that he maintains a slight edge among black voters. He won black voters with 39% in Nevada compared to Bernie, who had 27%. And that's a big increase for Bernie, but it's still 12 or so points behind Biden. And black voters in Nevada are of a different character than black voters in the South. So black voters in the South, I think, would be much more disposed to be supportive of Biden kind of proportionally, which is why obviously he's now going to go all in South Carolina. Biden absolutely must win South Carolina. I know that sounds like conventional pundit wisdom. You're hearing that everywhere, but it is true. He needs to win South Carolina, or else there's no rationale for his candidacy continuing. And he has to win. I mean, he's probably going to spin any win as a major victory, because it would be the first time that Biden ever wins a primary contest over the course of his 3 presidential campaigns spanning 30 plus years. But really, he does need to win South Carolina, not just by a squeaker margin, but substantially, in order for him to have even the impression of viability going forward. So what does that mean for the next week? Well, Mike Bloomberg needs Biden out of the race ASAP. So I'm sure Bloomberg is going to flood the country with anti-Bernie ads. And I'm sure the rhetoric is going to ramp up against Bernie from Bloomberg in particular, who has the resources to do it. But more significantly for Bloomberg, if he has any chance at all to get the majority of delegates, which is a small chance, but even if he wants, and so Bernie's now in this position where he can sort of glory in the feuding between Biden and Bloomberg, because it all redounds to Bernie's benefit. And remember, these sort of oversimplified categorizations of the candidates are relatively meaningless when you look at Bernie getting a healthy share of so-called moderate voters despite being a socialist. Voters do not think in these kind of pundit manufactured terms. So a lot of the Biden vote would go to Bernie if he drops out. Not all just going to seamlessly migrate to Mike Bloomberg. This is idea that you hear bandied about by mostly these former Republican pundits who ingratiated themselves or insinuated themselves into the liberal commentariat, whether through Twitter or MSNBC or what have you. They're now proposing these cockamamie plans where all the moderate candidates should get together in a room and decide which of them is going to be the standard bearer for the anti-Bernie moderate movement. It's like, that's not how things work. There's no way to achieve that level of coordination when you have candidates who have poured over a year of their lives into their campaigns, think that they are the ones who have the most compelling argument to remain in the race compared to the others. They're not going to have this sort of well thought out plan that they could just get together and hatch, especially in just a week. Super Tuesday is in 10 days? With South Carolina being on the Saturday before. So, no, that's not happening. And Bernie's sort of plurality here is just going to keep growing. Now, I wouldn't rule out other candidates doing particularly well on Super Tuesday in select states. I think Nevada as a caucus in the West was especially geared toward Bernie doing well, especially because he had sort of an organizational infrastructure that was in place in Nevada from 4 years ago that he kept cultivating. It's funny, when I wrote my piece in November of 2018 saying that Bernie was the front runner, go back and read that if you like. One of the main reasons I gave was that Bernie never stopped running for president. He's been running for president for like 5 years at this point. And when you're just continuously running for president, that means that the organizational infrastructure that you build up across the country remains in place. Obviously, in the interregnum period between the two campaigns, it has a little bit of a different quality. But the infrastructure is in place where you could just switch it on at any moment, and that's what he did. So that was a massive, massive advantage going into this current primary cycle. He was the runner-up in 2020, which the pundits just disregarded for some reason. He got, what was it, like 43% of the delegates nationally last time? So all that was waiting in the wings, and with a divided field, all you needed is a plurality to be considered the front runner, which he now is. Don't ask me, or you can continue asking me, but here's going to be my response to the question. People ask, why is Tulsi in the race? She didn't do well in Nevada. Well, okay, yeah, she wasn't campaigning in Nevada, but leave that aside. She didn't do as well as she would have liked in New Hampshire either. I get that. I never said at any time, despite my regular coverage and commentary and analysis of Tulsi, I never said that she was likely to win a majority of delegates at the Democratic convention, okay? The reasons for my covering her are based on the value that she uniquely adds to the national political discussion, based on my belief that she operates from a place of conviction and principle, and that she's courageous and she's largely right about things. Those are my reasons for giving her the attention that I've given her. Not because I thought that she was going to steamroll into the convention with a majority of delegates. Okay? Now, can she still get delegates somewhere? Yes. There is a nominating contest in American Samoa. There's a nominating contest in Hawaii, although I don't know how well she's going to do there given the hostility that the local Hawaii political scene have engendered against her. There are various other places in the country. I mean, she's been campaigning in Utah, where it's possible that she could do well. So it's possible that she could get some leverage by accumulating delegates, and even if she gets 0 delegates, being an active presidential candidate with the platform that affords, however marginalized she is, that's an extremely powerful platform. Much more so than if she was just a member of Congress. Much more so than if she dropped out, like many of these other candidates, at the first sign of ill fortune. So she says she's going to be campaigning all the way to the convention. I fully support that because she ought to, because she believes in her message, because her message is correct. And she's a very positive influence on the debate writ large. Did you notice logic that certain factions of establishment Democrats and liberals are going to be invoking to try to block Bernie from getting the nomination? Remember at the debate where all the candidates on stage were asked if they felt that the person who had the most delegates should get the nomination? And the only person who gave a clear answer was Bernie. The rest hedged and said, oh, we need to follow the rules. Tulsi pushed back against that on Friday night, saying that the person with the most delegates should get the nomination. So Tulsi, in addition to espousing the whole range of her views, which are useful in their own right, she also is in a position, by continuing to campaign across the country, of serving as a kind of internal watchdog within the Democratic primary, where she's not like Bernie, where Bernie has to sort of play nice with some of the establishment figures now in order to gain their support. He has to be more accommodating. Tulsi doesn't have to do that. She can let loose at the corruption of the corporate media, of the DNC, of the various other kind of actors who are corrupting the process. So that's what she's going to continue to do. And if you're pro-Bernie, which, you know, I have a broad affinity with Bernie, I've always made that clear. If you're pro-Bernie, you should want somebody else in the race who can make these arguments as a candidate, rather than just an outside observer. So that's what I have to say for those who troll me about why Tulsi's still in the race. And also, if you want to troll them back, you can say, why are you diminishing a woman of color? In fact, the only person of color left in the race. So twist their identity nonsense and throw it back in their face. Okay, let me find some super chats. Kevin asks, what are your thoughts on Tulsi's chances in the next states? It's Super Tuesday. What are you sensing with your spidey sense? I'm in Maryland, and I'm voting T regardless. Like I said, there are some states that are potentially tailored to her. But the problem is, when you're not on the debate stage, so there's only so much you can really do in that position. I think there are places where she has the potential to get delegates. But you know what? A vote for Tulsi is entirely warranted, even if your preferred ultimate outcome is a nomination of Bernie. That's my position. Because do you want her to have more influence or less? If you want her to have more influence, then voting for her helps that. Joss says, thank you with the little pear man. Thank you for that. Jacob says, you're part of the real left. Read Maupin on the synthetic left. Okay, I'll look that up. Elijah just says, USA Today is saying Nevada isn't the be-all, end-all. Well, I mean, he overperforms in caucus states, or at least he did in 2016. It looks like that might also be the case in 2020. Bernie slightly underperformed his polls in New Hampshire, even though he won. So, you know, see what happens in, like, Texas. If Bernie sweeps California, then, yeah, it's virtually over. Although that doesn't mean, even if he wins by 15 points in California, doesn't mean that they're not going to try to do some kind of delegate scheme. Who knows what Bloomberg could cook up, okay? Scattered comments here from Sparky, my cherished financial benefactor. Wants me to tell Jimmy Dore something. Yeah, okay, I'll tell him. What else? Let me go through a few things. Okay, so you have this mode of I switched on the Fox News Nevada coverage, and it's striking because the tenor of it was much fairer toward Bernie than some of the hysterical meltdown garbage you see on MSNBC, where James Carville is going and likening, Bernie's ascendance in the primary to, like, I don't even know what he was saying, some kind of World War II analogy or whatever. And that he doesn't just kowtow meekly to the dictates that they try to impose on him, leaving aside the various accommodations that he has made and the attempts he's undertaken to court elements of the Democratic establishment. But that does, obviously, Bernie doesn't, he hasn't flip-flopped egregiously over the years. He's not just your standard annoying liberal that is so easy for Fox News to ridicule. So there's almost like a sense of respect that engenders on some place like Fox. Now, I also think that there's a theme that Trump has been pushing and other Republicans, that Bernie would be the easiest to beat. So that's why they're almost like trollishly elevating him. You see Trump doing this on Twitter. What did he say exactly? Let me look it up. And I think he might have said something else this morning. Let's see here. Oh yeah, he just says, Trump says, looks like crazy Bernie is doing well in the great state of Nevada. Biden and the rest look weak, and no way Mini Mike can restart his campaign after the worst debate performance in the history of presidential debates. Congratulations, Bernie, and don't let them take it away from you. Okay. And he's also done various sort of trollishly complimentary tweets of Bernie. And you got to assume that part of the reason behind that is because he thinks that Bernie would be the easiest opponent. So I think some of the Trump advisors would be well served by informing Trump that Bernie is a far stronger candidate against him than pretty much everybody else in the field. I think I've always thought that Tulsi would be a very, very strong candidate, but look, she's been marginalized. I still want her to do well. But in terms of the people who've accumulated delegates, Bernie would be far stronger than like a Klobuchar. Are you kidding me? Warren? What a joke. Even Bloomberg. I mean, your money can only buy so much. You can't buy grassroots enthusiasm. It's ironic that they're boosting Bernie in this way, because they think that the whole country is just going to recoil in horror at socialism as if it's, 1965. These overconfident conservative pundits who are thinking to themselves, this is the way I put it on Twitter, but I'll just reiterate it here. They're thinking to themselves, oh, it's great if Bernie gets a nomination because the country doesn't want socialism. And once he's nominated, we can just spread around enough crappy memes from Facebook about Venezuela and share enough videos from Ben Shapiro and PragerU that the country is going to reject Bernie. No, nobody cares about your little conservative infotainment bubble. Sorry. The term socialism has been demystified, given that Bernie has been clear, and I wrote about this in the Swiss Magazine piece I did last week. Bernie has been clear that what he's conveying with the term socialism is not the nationalization, the forcible nationalization of all industry overnight. It's not the abolition of private property. It's not communism. Okay? It's the substantial expansion of the social welfare state. And so if you just can't, if you think you can campaign through memes against a cartoon fantasy version of Bernie, you're probably in for a rude awakening. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't liabilities with Bernie as a general election candidate. I think it would be a little bit difficult for him to win states like Florida, maybe Virginia, maybe North Carolina. But that doesn't override the strength that he does have elsewhere. And kind of concocting this caricature version of him, I don't think it's going to be effective when people can just listen to what he's saying. And you know what? Canceling all medical debt sounds pretty good. That's something that people don't even think is possible. It doesn't even occur to them that their medical debt might be canceled. I don't know about you, but canceling medical debt would help me out. That might get me out to vote. What Bernie has to do is figure out a better response to the Russia nonsense. And I talked about this in the last stream. You cannot validate elements of whatever round of Russia hysteria they're going to gin up, and they already are. Because if you validate aspects of it, then that can be used against you. And it's a joke. It should be rejected. At least Trump gets it, that the most effective thing is to simply reject it. Because if you give credence to the idea that some vague anonymous report of Russian interference actually does reflect reality, then whatever little example that somebody can fish out of Russian interference, even if it's as trivial and laughable as a single troll on Twitter, then because you've already validated the thrust of the narrative, that can be used against you. And that is certainly a liability that you'd hope Bernie would have the intelligence to counteract, although who knows? And who knows if his advisors are interested in relaying to him the reality. All right, people. I'm making these a little more short and sweet lately. 30 minutes is enough of my monologuing. There's always more to say, but I'll say it later. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, who knows? And we'll talk soon. Goodbye.